So Jonathan Safran Foer, you may have read some of his books. As a family of authors and thinkers, everything is illuminated. So he writes this: Jews have 6 senses: touch, taste, sight, smell, hearing, and memory. While Gentiles, he writes, while Gentiles experience and process the world through the traditional senses and use memory only as a second-order means of interpreting events, for Jews, memory is no less primary than the prick of a pin, or its silver glimmer, or the taste of the blood it pulls from the finger. The Jew is pricked by a pin and remembers other pins. It is only by tracing the pinprick back to other pinpricks, when his mother tried to fix his sleeve while his arm was still in it, or further when his grandfather's fingers fell asleep from stroking his great-grandfather's damp forehead, when Abraham tested the knife point to be sure Isaac would feel no pain, that the Jew is able to know why it hurts. When a Jew encounters a pin, he asks, the Jew asks, what does it remember like? What does it remember like? Such an interesting question. So I've been thinking about how do we remember and what is memory? Because we have a long memory. After all, we are the ones that have Tisha B'Av. That's an August holiday. They say that Jewish summer camps needed a holiday to celebrate, so they picked Tisha B'Av, which is a summer holiday. But Tisha B'Av, of course, is the destruction of the temples. King Ferdinand II of Aragon and Queen Elizabeth I of Castile gave the Jews of Spain 4 months to convert to Christianity when we were thrown out of Spain. And what was the date that they picked? They picked the 9th of Av as the day that they would be thrown out. So not only do we have memories, the people that don't like us have memories as well. The Inquisition, right. Thank you, Brittany. I should say that the day that they signed it and then gave 4 months was March 31st. It's our birthday, exactly. But the 9th of Av has become the 9th of Av, Tisha B'Av, has become a day that has been turned from just a date into a day of memory over centuries. There's no monuments to the 9th of Av. Actually, the best not monument, but it is next to the Kotel. We call it Robinson's Arch, simply because the archaeologist that dug and uncovered it was named Robinson. And there, the stones that were at the top of the temple are still left on the ground. Right? It's the same wall as the Kotel, but the Kotel area is very cleaned up and beautiful, even if it is divided in a different way than this room is right now. Right? But that next to it in the Robinson's Arch area, or it's also known as the egalitarian Kotel, that the bricks that are clearly from the very top had been pushed down over the centuries. But I'm interested in other dates that are memorialized as well. So December 7th, 1941, what is that day? Pearl Harbor, right. So, and I think that there's probably a generational divide who instantly know that December 7th is Pearl Harbor, and for others where it's just a date in history. There's 364 other days as well. Of course, this was the day that Japan launched the surprise attack on the U.S. at the naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. 2,403 American servicemen were killed that day. And 4 days later, the U.S. declared war against Germany and Japan and was fully engaged in World War II. The story is told that actually there was supposed to be a communique, a declaration of war by Japan, but it was delivered from Japan to the Japanese embassy in Washington in such a super coded way that it took them too long to decode it, translate it into English, and then to deliver the declaration of war, so that it truly was the surprise that we're aware of. I remember as a kid going and visiting the USS Arizona, the memorial that is over that battleship. And my memory is that there was a glistening of the water, and I don't know if that is still there, or that was my memory sort of putting it is there, I see nods. But that was powerful. Another date that we've turned into memory, September 11th, 2001. September 11th. The terrorist attack, right? That it's just the date, like Tisha B'Av, the date itself becomes the event. The attacks on the Twin Towers and the Pentagon and Shanksville, that I was living in New York at the time, and if you've been to the memorial site of the Twin Towers, it is two deep holes that sort of draw you in. It is beautiful, it is evocative, it is disturbing in the ways that it should be. This past week was September 11th. And so I've been thinking about this 23 years since the attack, which changed America and the world in so many ways, how a date, well, as FDR said, becomes something that lives in infamy. And yet, some dates become memorials themselves. Of celebrations, July 4th is a date that becomes a holiday by itself. You just say the name, and there it is. Often the internet is a wonderful place for learning new things. We usually talk about it, how the horrors of the internet, but in exploring this idea of dates and memory, I skimmed through an academic paper that Professors Brady Wagner and Ignacio Bresco wrote. One is based in Norway and the other in Spain, and the paper is titled "Memorials as Healing Places, a Matrix for Bridging Material Design and Visitor Experiences." So I love the NIH PubMed website. It helps scratch that nerdiest itch that I have. So memorials have many functions. They write, memorial sites serve intellectual, emotional, spiritual, and communal functions, including a place of memory, a place of mourning, a place of reflection and healing, a place for ceremony, and a place for collective action. And we have certainly seen this. Think about the experiences of the Lincoln Memorial or the Vietnam War Memorial. It covers many of these criteria, a place of memory, but also of mourning, of reflection, maybe through that act of visiting, an act of healing and of ceremony, and also of action. But what about a date that doesn't have a place, like a memorial? I recall how we were sensitive to setting a bar mitzvah on September 11th, or scheduling any activity on that date of September 11th because of the power that the number and the name had. And now for some, it's a day to remember as well as just a day to live as well. Meetings happen, you go to the grocery store, things happen on September 11th, even as it is simultaneously a powerful day of transformation. This past Wednesday was September 11th, and it was also Wednesday. But it is a day to balance both. So I'm interested in your thoughts. Tell me what Wednesday, this past Wednesday, September 11th, was like for you this year. How much was it Wednesday? How much was it memorial? How much was it ceremony? How much was it healing? I'm interested to hear what did you do on Wednesday? So, Mitchell and Adam?
In Baltimore, there's an organization, the sixth branch, that does community service
Okay.
every September 11th.
So it's a day of service.
Right.
Yeah.
Former military created this organization. They work in the Baltimore inner city.
And you participated in that? So Mitchell's saying, who works in Baltimore, he's saying there was an organization started by veterans who do organized days of service. And he and I'm assuming colleagues did a day of service on September 11th. Thank you. Adam.
I read an article about a man who was the director of security for one of the major banks in that building. It was Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan, something like that. But he was a British Army veteran who was then in the United States Army, served in Vietnam, but was just incredibly focused on security and preparation, and was convinced that something was going to happen in those buildings because he was around in '93. And so he made the organization practice evacuating over and over to the consternation of everybody. At the time of the attacks, he was already dying of cancer, and he led 3,000 people out of the buildings, singing Welsh songs to calm their nerves, and called his wife and basically told her, "Don't worry, this was the greatest day of his life," and was last seen going back in one more time.
Wow. Wow. I'm moved by the story that I'll repeat so we can all hear. But I'm also caught that for me it is both a date and so much more. Because I wouldn't be moved by that. So what Adam just shared is that he read the story this week of he was like the security officer, like the person in charge of evacuation drills and things like that at one of the companies in the Twin Towers. And he was convinced in his analysis, because of past attacks on the Twin Towers, that something at some point was going to happen, and that he spent his career annoying people, that they had to practice evacuations, they had to practice all of those emergency things, that when there's a fire drill, you know how we just sort of loiter around and we don't really take it too seriously. But he was, well, I'll say militant, because Adam described him as having a military background. So the attacks happened on September 11th, that he saved 3,000 people because they knew how to evacuate. They knew that. Adam shares that the person that he's talking about led them in Welsh songs to just sort of calm them, as you can imagine. Maybe the staircases were smoke-filled, or certainly they were fearful. And he was last seen going back into the building to save more. So he read that story as well. And Brittany, last comment here. What was Wednesday, September 11th, like for you? Your grandma's birthday, which means what? How? It's both a day of celebration that it's your grandma's birthday?
She turned 92.
Great. And so we remember that it is both a...
She turned 92, but I was on vacation in Buffalo, New York, though, so
Oh,
I went to Rochester, Buffalo, and Niagara Falls, so I just came back from Niagara Falls
great.
yesterday.
Great. Well, I look forward to hearing more about it at Kiddush. But that September 11th is your grandmother's birthday, so a day of memory is also a day of celebration in there, because it is still also just a day. So I don't know how much time is needed to pass before December 7th became just a date again, or also a date again. And for a generation, it may not be. It may also be part of their lived experience. So December 7th is always Pearl Harbor. For me, September 11th is my lived experience, but not for my kids. Ben was 11 months old, and we were living in Manhattan. But for my kids, they only know a time of when you take off your shoes at the airport. I ask all of this because I wonder when October 7th will also be a date that can also just be a date again, because it will never be just a date again, that we are very much in the midst of it And I wonder when the date will not traumatize us anymore, when we will be able to see it as a regular Monday as well as a date of transformative significance. I know it will be a long time from now. It is too raw. And we are still very much in the moment of October 7th. It took Congress 53 years before they declared a National Day of Memory for Pearl Harbor. And of course, we still as Jews mourn the 9th of Av 2,600 years later after the destruction of the first temple. And maybe one day we can talk about October 7th like this. But now I am girding myself for the first anniversary next month. The pain is too deep, it is too raw, too constant to think about memorializing the date yet. And as Jonathan Safran Foer wrote, Jews have 6 senses: touch, taste, sight, smell, hearing, and memory. The right moment will come with time, and maybe even years will pass. Until then, may we live a life worthy of those who died on the 9th of Av gone by, at December 7th, on September 11th, and October 7th.